Sarah Mitchell stood at the window of her hotel room in Millbrook, Colorado, staring down at the high school parking lot. 20 years had passed since she'd walked these halls as a quiet, awkward teenager. 20 years since she left this small town with nothing but her mother's encouragement and a burning need to prove herself to everyone who'd ever doubted her. The reunion invitation had arrived 6 months ago. She almost threw it away. Almost. But something made her hold on to it, tuck it into her dresser drawer, and pull it out again and again. Maybe it was time. Maybe people had changed. Maybe she could finally go back and feel like she belonged. Sarah was different now. 20 years of military service, 2 combat tours, and a career as a decorated Apache helicopter pilot had transformed the shy girl into a woman of quiet confidence. Her uniform hung in the hotel closet, pressed and perfect, but tonight she was wearing something else, a simple black dress that fit her muscular frame perfectly. Her dark hair, once frizzy and unmanageable, fell in sleek waves down her back. Her green eyes, which classmates had once mocked as weird and spooky, now held the steady gaze of someone who'd made impossible decisions at 30,000 feet. She picked up her phone and checked the time, 6:30. The reunion started at 8. She had an hour and a half to sit with her thoughts. The memories came flooding back, unbidden and unwelcome. High school had been brutal for Sarah. She wasn't pretty enough, not popular enough, not athletic enough. She was too smart for the athletes, but too awkward for the academic kids. She spent lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. She ate alone. She sat alone. She was alone. The bullying had been relentless, though nothing that would make the news or prompt an investigation. It was the small cruelties that hurt most. Whispered comments in the hallway, laughter that cut off when she walked into a room, being left out of group projects, or worse, included only to be assigned the busy work while others got the interesting parts. The way boys would pretend to ask her out as a joke, their friends laughing from around the corner. The worst had been Jennifer Hartley and her crew. Jennifer had been the queen of Millbrook High, blonde, wealthy, beautiful, and cruel in the way that only teenage girls seemed to master. Jennifer had made a sport of cutting Sarah down. Not just Sarah, but anyone she decided wasn't worthy of her attention. Sarah had left Millbrook right after graduation without looking back. She joined the army on a whim, really. Her guidance counselor had nearly choked when she announced it in the office. "You," he'd said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "A soldier." That disbelief had fueled her. It still did if she was honest. She'd gone through basic training, then officer candidate school. She'd earned her wings as a pilot, had been selected for the elite Apache helicopter program. She'd flown combat missions over Afghanistan and Iraq. She'd made split-second decisions that saved lives and, yes, ended lives too. She'd been promoted to major. She'd received medals and commendations. She'd built a life that was meaningful and purposeful. But none of it had erased the feeling she carried deep in her chest. The feeling of not belonging, of being the outsider, of being underestimated and dismissed. She wondered who would be at the reunion tonight. Probably Jennifer. Jennifer had always seemed like the type to stay in Millbrook, to marry a local boy, to run a boutique or something equally predictable. The thought made Sarah feel a complicated mixture of satisfaction and shame. She wasn't supposed to feel superior. She wasn't supposed to want to prove anything anymore. She was supposed to be past all this. But she wasn't. Sarah checked her reflection in the mirror. She looked good, more than good. She looked confident and capable and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or hairstyles. It was the bearing of someone who'd accomplished something real in her life. Still, there was a tremor in her hands as she slipped into her heels. There was a flutter of anxiety in her stomach as she checked her appearance one final time. She was Major Sarah Mitchell, Apache pilot, veteran of 2 wars, and she was terrified of walking into her high school gymnasium. She took a breath, put her shoulders back, lifted her chin. It was time to go home. The gymnasium hadn't changed much. The same tired bleachers, the same faded blue and gold banners on the walls. Long tables had been set up with name tags and plastic cups of punch. A DJ stood in the corner, playing hits from the 90s and early 2000s, the same songs everyone had danced to at prom. Sarah had walked in alone, deliberately arriving early. She didn't want to make an entrance. She wanted to slip in quietly, get a drink, find a corner. She was already holding her second cup of punch when they arrived. The Jennifer Hartley fan club, she called them. Jennifer, still blonde but now with an expensive-looking cut and highlights that had probably cost more than Sarah's monthly apartment rent. Jennifer's best friends from high school, Ashley and Madison, the names tumbling back into Sarah's memory like they were burned there. They looked good, all three of them. They looked like they'd had comfortable lives. They looked like they'd never had a moment of doubt. Jennifer's eyes passed right over Sarah at first. Then something flickered, a moment of confusion. Her gaze came back. "Oh my God," Jennifer said, her voice carrying across the gymnasium in that same distinctive way it had in high school, loud enough to get everyone's attention. "Is that Sarah Mitchell?" "Here we go," Sarah thought. "Sarah, right?" Jennifer continued, walking over with her friends trailing behind like satellites. "I almost didn't recognize you. Did you do something with your hair and your eyes? They look different." It was a test, Sarah realized. This was how Jennifer operated, had always operated. She'd offer a compliment that was actually an insult, wrapped up in a tone that suggested concern. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive cruelty. "Hey, Jennifer," Sarah said quietly. She didn't smile, but she didn't stiffen either. She just stood there, calm and steady. "So what have you been up to?" Jennifer asked. "Please tell me you didn't move back to Millbrook." Ashley and Madison giggled right on cue. "No," Sarah said, "I've been in the Army." She said it simply, without fanfare or expectation of response. There was a pause. Then Jennifer laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of ice. "The Army," she said. Oh, that's actually perfect. I can totally see you following orders and doing exactly what you're told." She exchanged glances with her friends, who laughed. "What are you, like a secretary or something? Do they even let women do anything interesting in the military?" Sarah had heard this before many times. It was part of the job, really, the dismissal, the assumptions, the condescension. She'd learned not to let it touch her. "I'm a pilot," Sarah said. "Apache helicopters." She watched Jennifer's face. There was a moment where Jennifer didn't know what to do with this information. An Apache was a weapon of war. It wasn't a secretary's job. It was a position of authority, of responsibility, of real skill and training. But Jennifer was nothing if not quick on her feet. "Oh, how nice," she said, stretching out the word. "I mean, that's great that you found something you're good at. Not all of us have to go so far from home to feel important, though. I'm running a very successful business here in Millbrook. Ashley's husband owns a construction company. Madison just opened a yoga studio. We've really stayed connected to the community, you know." It was a knife and a smile, delivered by an expert. "That's good," Sarah said, and she meant it. She wasn't being sarcastic, though Jennifer didn't seem to believe her. "Well, it was nice seeing you," Jennifer said, already turning away. "Enjoy the reunion. Maybe you'll meet someone tonight. You know, someone who appreciates a woman in uniform." She said it in a way that made uniform sound like a costume, like Sarah was playing dress-up. As Jennifer and her friends walked away, still laughing, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, exactly. Not hurt, though there was some of that. It was more like confirmation. Some people didn't change. Some people were frozen in amber at 17, forever playing the same games, hurling the same insults. Sarah set down her punch cup and decided to leave. The reunion had been a mistake. Nothing good was going to come from this. She was walking toward the exit when her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from her commanding officer. "Call when you can. Situation developing." Sarah stepped outside into the cool Colorado night and dialed. When she heard the news, everything changed. Colonel James Patterson had been Sarah's commanding officer for the last 3 years. He was a career military officer, gruff and demanding but fair. Sarah respected him more than almost anyone she knew. "We've got a situation," he said without preamble. "Intelligence reports say we've got a situation developing in the northeastern sector. American ground forces are pinned down. They're requesting air support." "Now," Sarah said, "Sir, I'm on leave. I'm not mission ready." "I know where you are," he said. "Mitchell, I wouldn't call if this wasn't critical. The ground team has 3 wounded and they're taking heavy fire. We need an Apache in the air in the next hour, and you're the closest qualified pilot we've got. There's a National Guard installation 45 minutes north. Hello's waiting. Full ordnance." Sarah's mind was already shifting. The reunion, Jennifer, the hurt feelings, it all receded like water draining from a tub. This was what she lived for. This was what mattered. "I'm on my way," she said. She hung up and stood for a moment in the parking lot, breathing in the cool night air. Then she walked back into the gymnasium. She didn't care about being dramatic. She didn't care about how it would look. She went directly to the coat check, got her jacket, and turned to leave. On impulse, she stopped by the punch table where Jennifer and her friends were standing, talking to other classmates. "Hey, Jennifer," Sarah called out. "I have to go, work emergency." Jennifer turned, surprised. "Oh, that's too bad. What kind of emergency could possibly?" "Combat support," Sarah said simply. "American soldiers are pinned down. I'm flying an Apache to provide air support. I'll probably be gone about 8 hours minimum, so I'm going to have to miss the rest of the reunion." She didn't wait for a response. She just walked out. The flight to the National Guard installation took 40 minutes. Sarah pushed her old truck as fast as she dared on the mountain roads, her hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through her body. By the time she arrived, everything was prepared. The Apache sat on the tarmac, sleek and dangerous in the darkness, its rotors checked and ready. The weapons were loaded. The flight path was plotted. The ground team's location was marked. Sarah ran through her pre-flight check with her weapons officer, Captain David Torres. Torres was a young man, sharp and steady, someone she'd trained herself. "Situation's hot," Torres said as they climbed into the aircraft. "Ground teams taking fire from 3 positions, building complex about 2 clicks northeast of their position. They're requesting fire support on those buildings." "How many civilians in the area?" Sarah asked. "Intelligence says the buildings are empty. It's a known militant compound." Sarah nodded and raised the helicopter off the ground. The Apache lifted smoothly, its rotors cutting through the night air. They climbed to 3,000 feet, and Sarah turned toward the northeast. This was where she was meant to be. This was what she'd trained for. This was the moment where all the mocking and the dismissal meant nothing, because the outcome of the next hour would determine whether American soldiers lived or died. Sarah had flown hundreds of combat missions. The fear never fully went away. It wasn't supposed to, but it was transformed into focus, into clarity. Her world narrowed to the HUD in front of her, the radio chatter in her ears, and the instruments she'd learned to read like another language. "Ground team is designating target," Torres said. "I've got it on the thermal, building on the east side of the complex." "Roger," Sarah said. She adjusted the helicopter's heading and descended toward the engagement altitude. The Apache was called the Shark of the Sky for a reason. It was a predator, and Sarah was its hunter. She had multiple weapons systems at her disposal: 30mm chain gun, Hydra rockets, Hellfire missiles. Each had its purpose, its effective range, its consequences. "Weapons hot," Torres confirmed. Sarah saw the complex below them, saw the muzzle flashes from one of the buildings, saw the enemies shooting at the American soldiers pinned down 2 kilometers away. She thought about Jennifer Hartley and her expensive haircut, drinking cheap punch in a high school gymnasium. She thought about Jennifer's dismissal, her assumption that Sarah was someone easily dismissed. Then she pushed those thoughts away. They didn't belong here. Here there was only the mission. "Target acquired," Sarah said, firing. The Hydra rockets left the Apache's wings in a streak of fire and light. Sarah pulled up and banked hard left, already looking for the next target. The next 2 hours were a blur of adrenaline, precision, and violence. Sarah and Torres provided close air support to the ground team, engaging 3 different positions with rockets and 30mm fire. They guided in a medical evacuation helicopter for the wounded. They circled above the American soldiers as they extracted from the area, providing cover with their weapons while staying clear of friendly fire zones. Only when they were safely airborne and heading back to base did Sarah allow herself to take a full breath. "Ground team says all wounded are stable," Torres reported. "They're calling it a successful mission, no friendly casualties." Sarah nodded. She didn't feel victorious. She felt heavy. This was the part of her job that civilians didn't understand, that Jennifer Hartley would never understand. Yes, she'd stopped an ambush. Yes, she'd prevented American deaths. But she'd also killed people. She'd destroyed buildings. She'd unleashed violence on a scale that was hard to comprehend unless you'd seen it from the cockpit. This was the cost of what she did. This was what they trained for, what they accepted when they signed up. It was necessary, it was right, and it was still hard to carry. "You did good work out there," Torres said quietly. "So did you," Sarah replied. She meant it. Torres had called the targets with precision, had managed the weapons systems perfectly, had done his job with professionalism. They flew back to the National Guard base in silence. When they landed, Colonel Patterson was waiting in the operations center. "That was excellent work, Mitchell," he said. "You probably saved those soldiers' lives." "How many did we lose?" Sarah asked, the question that mattered most. "None, 3 wounded, but they're all stable. No fatalities." Sarah nodded. That would have to be enough. She filed her reports, did her debriefing, answered every question thoroughly and professionally. It was past midnight when she finally left the base. She drove back to her hotel in Millbrook in a daze, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. Her hands shook a little on the steering wheel. Her eyes felt dry. It was 2 in the morning when she arrived back at the hotel. She sat in her truck in the parking lot for 10 minutes without moving, just breathing, coming down from the mission. Then she went inside and fell into bed, still partially clothed. She was asleep in seconds. She woke at 7 in the morning to multiple text messages. Most were from her mother, asking if she was okay, if she'd made it back to the reunion. One was from a number she didn't recognize at first. She opened it and read, "OMG, did you hear? Major Sarah Mitchell flew an Apache combat mission last night from the guard base. There were soldiers' lives at stake, and she saved them. Wow, who knew quiet little Sarah Mitchell would turn out to be an actual war hero?" The text was from Ashley, forwarded no doubt from Jennifer's contacts or shared in a group chat. Sarah set the phone down and lay back in bed. The story was out. Of course it was. In a town like Millbrook, something like that would spread like wildfire. A high school reunion, then dramatic exit for a combat mission. It was the kind of story people couldn't resist telling. She wasn't sure how she felt about it. Her mother called at 8 in the morning. "Sarah, oh my God, honey, I heard about your mission. Are you all right? I've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mom," Sarah said, and it was mostly true. "The mission went well, everyone's okay." "I'm so proud of you," her mother said, and Sarah could hear tears in her voice. "I've always been proud of you, but I wanted you to know." After they hung up, Sarah lay in bed and thought about pride. Her mother had always been proud of her, even when she was awkward and bullied in high school. That had been enough then. It should be enough now. But it wasn't, not entirely. There was a knock at her hotel room door at 10 in the morning. Sarah almost didn't answer it, but something made her get up and check the peephole. It was Jennifer Hartley. Jennifer looked different in the harsh morning light. She looked older than she had the night before, more vulnerable. Her makeup was fresh, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well. "Can I come in?" Jennifer asked. Sarah considered closing the door. She had every right to. Instead, she stepped back and let Jennifer enter. "I heard about your mission," Jennifer said without preamble. "Everyone's talking about it. You saved soldiers' lives." "It was my job," Sarah said. She didn't invite Jennifer to sit, didn't offer her coffee. She just stood there waiting. "I know," Jennifer said, "and you're really good at your job, apparently excellent at it." There was something in her voice that Sarah couldn't quite identify. Not quite an apology, but something in that direction. "I was horrible to you in high school," Jennifer continued. "I was horrible to a lot of people, but I was especially horrible to you, and I just want you to know that I've thought about that. I felt bad about it for a long time." Sarah didn't respond. She waited. "When I heard what you'd done," Jennifer continued, "when I heard that you'd saved those soldiers' lives and that you do that you flew a helicopter into danger to help people, I felt really small. I felt like I was that girl in high school, mocking someone who turned out to be braver and better than I ever could be." "I'm not better than you," Sarah said quietly. It was the truth. "No, you're not," Jennifer agreed. "But you're not what I thought you were either. I thought you were someone who was weak, who couldn't handle the world, who would never amount to anything. And I was wrong. I was so wrong." Sarah studied Jennifer's face. She was being sincere, she thought. That was almost harder to take than the cruelty. "People change," Sarah said. "I've changed, you might have too." "I hope so," Jennifer said. "I really do. I wouldn't want my daughter growing up to be the person I was in high school." That surprised Sarah. "You have a daughter." "Two, actually, and a son. They're 8, 6, and 4. Jennifer smiled. "They're monsters, every one of them, but they're teaching me about kindness in a way I never learned in high school." Sarah nodded slowly. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Jennifer said. "I just needed you to know that I've thought about it, and that I'm proud of what you've done, even if I don't deserve to be." After Jennifer left, Sarah sat on her hotel bed and tried to process the conversation. She felt, not lighter exactly. The weight of her job, of the lives she'd taken and saved, was still there, but something had shifted. Maybe Jennifer was just experiencing guilt, or trying to make herself feel better. Maybe this would mean nothing. But there was also the possibility that she was being genuine, that she'd actually grown and changed the way Sarah had. People were complicated. Forgiveness was complicated. Sarah decided she wasn't ready to decide what to do with Jennifer's apology. Maybe she would be eventually, or maybe not. Sarah decided to go back to the reunion that evening, not to make a point, not to prove anything, but because she realized that hiding from her high school wasn't the same as being free from it, and she wanted to be free. She dressed carefully in her army uniform this time. She'd brought it with her for a reason, even though she hadn't consciously admitted it to herself. There was nothing wrong with wearing her uniform, and it was the most honest way to present herself. The gymnasium was fuller tonight. The energy was different, more relaxed, more genuine. People had drunk enough to be past their initial self-consciousness. When Sarah walked in, people noticed. She could see the moment when someone recognized her, saw the uniform, and started whispering to someone else. The story had traveled, magnified, and transformed by retelling the way stories do in small towns. But Sarah didn't let it bother her. She found the punch table and got a drink. She found an empty corner and stood there comfortably, watching people reconnect with their younger selves. An older man approached her. She recognized him as Mr. Henderson, who'd taught history in their high school. "Major Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "I heard about your mission. That was extraordinary." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said, shaking his hand. "How have you been?" They talked for 10 minutes about teaching, about changes in the school, about retirement. It was easy and pleasant. When Mr. Henderson excused himself, Sarah felt settled in a way she hadn't before. Over the course of the evening, several people came up to her. Some she remembered, some she didn't. A few actually apologized for being unkind in high school. Most just wanted to hear about her military service, about flying Apache helicopters, about combat. Sarah told them what she could, keeping it real but not graphic. Around 10 o'clock, as the reunion was winding down, the DJ made an announcement. "Last song of the night," he said. "Let's make it a good one." He played "Don't Stop Believin'," that song from the 80s that felt more fitting for a high school reunion than anything else could. Sarah wasn't sure why she did it, but she found herself walking out to the parking lot. She needed air. She needed space. She was standing in the cool night, breathing in when she heard the sound. At first, it was just a distant rumble, barely noticeable. Then it grew louder, more distinct. The distinctive thud-thud-thud-thud of helicopter rotors. Sarah looked up. There against the dark sky she could see lights, red and white moving rapidly, and the sound of an Apache helicopter. It came into view over the high school, moving fast and low. Sarah knew that bird like she knew her own body. She knew the sound of its engines, the weight of its presence in the sky. She knew the deadly grace of its movement. It was an Apache from the National Guard base. She recognized the tail number as it passed overhead. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, head tilted back, as the helicopter passed nearly directly over the school building. The sound was enormous, overwhelming, magnificent. The rotors beat at the air with purpose and power. This was a machine built for one thing: protection. This was a machine that could reach out and save lives across impossible distances. This was her machine. This was her purpose. Inside the gymnasium, she would later hear, everyone had jumped. The sound was deafening, unexpected. Several people had rushed to the windows. The DJ had stopped the music. But Sarah just stood there in the parking lot and watched the Apache move away toward the northeast, toward the guard base, toward wherever it was needed next. 3 weeks later, Sarah received an invitation. It was to a special assembly at Millbrook High School. The principal wanted to honor her service and her sacrifice. The entire school would gather to hear her speak. Sarah's first instinct was to decline. She wasn't an athlete coming home to be celebrated. She wasn't a successful businessperson. She was just a soldier doing her job. But she thought about the next generation of kids in that school. She thought about the teenagers who might be bullied, who might think they didn't belong, who might believe that their high school was the sum total of their potential. And she realized that maybe it was worth doing. She went back to Millbrook. The assembly was held on a Friday morning. The gymnasium was packed with students, teachers, administrators. Sarah stood backstage in her dress uniform, her medals displayed on her chest, and felt the weight of what was about to happen. The principal introduced her with glowing words. Sarah walked out to applause that made her ears ring. She stood at the podium and looked out at a sea of teenage faces. Some were familiar. They were younger versions of the people she'd known. Some were new, of course. Every face was different, every story different, every potential future unwritten. "I don't like talking about myself," Sarah began. "But Principal Adams asked me to come here today because apparently I did something worth talking about. I flew a helicopter that saved some soldiers' lives, and that's my job. It's what I'm trained to do." She paused. "But I want to tell you something that's not about Apache helicopters or military service. I want to tell you about being a teenager in Millbrook, Colorado, in the year 2000. She watched some of the older teachers shift, understanding where this was going. "I was not a popular kid," Sarah continued. "I was awkward. I was shy. I didn't belong in the cafeteria or at football games or at the parties that apparently everyone but me was invited to. There were kids who mocked me. There was a girl who made it her personal mission to make sure I understood that I didn't measure up." She saw Jennifer Hartley sitting in the back row, watching intently. "That girl hurt me," Sarah said calmly. "Not because she was a bad person, but because I gave her the power to. I believed in some way that what she thought of me was true. I believed that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong, that I should be ashamed of who I was." Sarah's hands were steady on the podium. "But here's the thing about high school," she said. "It's not real life. It's a small, intense, artificial world where the rules are different from anywhere else. The kids who are at the top of that world, some of them stay at the top, some of them don't. And the kids who are at the bottom, some of them stay at the bottom, but most of them don't. Most of them go out into the world and discover that there are places where they belong. There are people who need what they have to offer. There are dreams they can actually achieve." She looked directly at the students. "If you're being bullied right now, if you feel like you don't belong, if you think high school is proof that you're not good enough, I'm telling you that's a lie. A temporary, painful lie, but a lie nonetheless." Sarah told them about joining the military, about discovering that she was good at something, about finding purpose. She told them briefly and carefully about the soldiers she'd saved. "I'm not special," she said. "I'm not a superhero. I'm just someone who found a path that worked for me. And that path would have been impossible if I'd believed what the people in this school told me when I was 16 years old." When she finished speaking, there was silence. Then the applause started, from the students, from the teachers, even from some of the people she'd gone to school with who'd shown up to watch. After the assembly, Sarah was surrounded by students wanting to talk to her, wanting to ask questions, wanting to tell her their own stories of not belonging. An 8th-grade girl cried and said Sarah had given her the courage not to hurt herself. A junior boy thanked her for proving that it was okay to be different. It was exhausting and meaningful in equal measure. That afternoon, Sarah returned to her hotel to pack. She was leaving the next morning. She had to report back to base. But she decided to take a walk through the town first, to say goodbye to the places she remembered. She found herself at the edge of town, at the overlook that teenagers used to sneak out to. It was a spot with a view of the whole valley, the mountains beyond, the endless sky. As she stood there, breathing in the thin mountain air, she heard the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors. Another Apache approaching from the southeast. Sarah recognized it. It was the same bird she'd seen at the reunion, probably doing a training run from the guard base. It approached her position, then did something unusual. It slowed. It hovered almost directly above her for nearly a minute. Sarah could see the cockpit, could see the pilot and weapons officer looking down at her. She raised her hand in a salute. The helicopter tilted its nose up in response, the closest thing to a wave that an Apache could do, then rose into the air and moved away, heading back toward the base. Sarah stood there smiling, tears on her cheeks, and she thought about how far she'd come. Not just geographically, though she'd certainly traveled thousands of miles, but emotionally, spiritually. She'd come back to the place where she'd been broken, and she'd discovered that she was whole. She'd come back to face the people who'd hurt her, and she'd discovered that she'd already won just by becoming herself. The Apache disappeared over the mountains. 1 year later, Sarah received a letter. It was addressed to her military base, redirected through 3 addresses before it found her. It was from Jennifer Hartley. Sarah almost didn't open it, but something made her. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. "Dear Sarah," it read, "I wanted you to know that I saw a photo of you in a magazine. It was about women in combat roles, and you were featured. You looked so confident, so capable, and I remembered our conversation at the reunion. I want you to know that I've thought about what you said in that assembly more than I've thought about anything in a long time. You said that high school wasn't real life. I've been thinking about whether I ever grew up past high school, if I've been living in that same small, artificial world for the last 20 years. And I think the answer is yes. I started seeing a therapist. I've been thinking about the person I was, the person I am, and the person I want to be. My kids have started to see the changes in me. My marriage is better. My life is better. I owe you a debt I can never repay. You came back to a place that hurt you and told the truth about it. You didn't let yourself be diminished by what happened then. And in doing that, you freed me from something I didn't even know I was trapped by. I'm grateful. I'm sorry for what I did, and I'm grateful for who you are. Always. Jennifer." Sarah read the letter 3 times. She cried just a little at the end. Then she filed it away in a box with her other important papers. Because that was the thing about going back, about facing your past, about standing in your truth. Sometimes the people who hurt you surprise you. Sometimes they grow. Sometimes they become people worth knowing. But whether they did or not, you were free. You were finally truly free.